Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. You are here for Human Factors in Workplace Design, designing spaces that are more naturally human. My name is Melissa Sweat. I'm Customer Relationship and Community Manager at People on the Go, and I'll be moderating our webinar today. Before we start, let's just do a quick check to make sure that you can hear me just fine and see the screen. Go ahead and locate the questions panel and go to webinar and just type in a brief note. Awesome, thank you so much. By the way, that's the same panel that we'll be using to take questions at the end of the presentation. A quick background about us and why we have these sessions, especially for those who are with us for the first time. We have these sessions because our focus at People on the Go is productivity and leadership in the workplace. And the topics that you see on the screen are the topics that we cover in our workshops and webinars. And now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Melissa Steach. Melissa truly believes that work is a physical, cognitive, and social experience. Formerly trained as a fine artist, she brings her understanding of aesthetics to the world of workplace well-being in her role at Herman Miller as a human factors and ergonomics specialist. Deeply passionate about sharing the profound effect work environments have on employee experience and well-being, Melissa has presented on this topic at Fuse Design and Brand in London and Miami, as well as the OD Network National Conference. She is a best-selling author and recipient of the Emerson Art Fellowship. Melissa is proud to be part of the Herman Miller legacy and commitment to the creation of cutting-edge, effective, and beautiful workplace designs and environments through the use of human-focused research. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Melissa.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am going to share my screen here and get started. And the reason that I'm here is to really help explain and help us gain a deeper understanding of how when we feel better, we work better. And, you know, we don't always, those of us who are in the design industry, we have sometimes when I speak to professionals a kind of no-duh attitude about, well, yeah, of course the built environment affects you. But this isn't something that's always on top of our minds, that the way an architect, a building is designed architecturally, or the way chairs and workspaces are laid out can have such a profound effect on how we experience and how we engage at work. So this presentation is really to help us all gain a deeper understanding of the built environment's effect on us as it relates to human beings ergonomically. And what I'll do throughout this presentation is go over what ergonomics is, and it really, it's there are three different areas of ergonomics. There are the physical, it is the cognitive, and it is the social. And by providing an overview of these, we can really help understand how to, even if your workspace is your home office, to really help you understand how to make it healthier for you to do the work that's important. So as we know, offices can be very taxing environments, and whether that's in a big corporate headquarters or again that's at home, it's really important to know that the basics of how we set up our space can really impact how we contribute to the workplace, not just in productivity, but also in quality and in passion and in prosperity. So it's very important to understand that organizations have an ongoing challenge to really move beyond the mouse and the keyboard and the chair. And this Band-Aid approach, we like to call it in ergonomics, while it may help in the short term because it's a Band-Aid, it doesn't quite deal with the holistic element of why the body is impacted by space the way that it is. So we really want to be able to comprehend how there's a nature and an interaction of all the elements of ergonomics that play together. And ergonomics stems from the Greek words nomos and ergon, and that's work and natural laws. And it really is a study of the interaction among humans and other elements of the workplace, and really came about during World War II, when we really got into major manufacturing mode and began to really understand that repetition and manual labor needed to be understood in regard to the body so that we could be more productive, both from a business ROI perspective and to make sure that we took care of employees and the employees take care of ourselves. So just like the human system, which is a living system, I encourage you to think of your workplace as a living system also that really supports you and changes based on the individuals who comprise the whole over time. Now, this slide always gets people's attention. It goes through basically how for every dollar spent on an ergonomic solution in the beginning, an organization can get a return of investment of about $17.50 at the year end. And this is because, you know, we're not in the 1950s where someone might lose a limb on the manufacturing floor, but here now, in 2017, it's those small, minute movements that we do over and over and over again, or it's no movement at all, where you're just staring at your screen and your eyes aren't moving at all, and that's straining. And these little things add up, and they actually cost a lot more in terms of disability claims and workers' comp and stress and absenteeism and even presenteeism, because we're not really even aware that they're happening until it's built up and there's this waterfall effect where the dam just breaks and all of a sudden you have more severe physical problems. And as you can see from this slide, it's pretty shocking to think of how much time we spend in front of our computers doing work. And I know I can just speak from my own experience, being in graduate school, finishing up now, and working full time. The needs of my eyes have changed dramatically just over the past year. I also remember being 20 and my mom telling me to turn the lights up, and us not understanding that you need essentially 2 times the light at 40 as you do at 20, and 3 times at 60, and this is simply a matter of fact. So even if you have 20/20 vision, you need more light, and this is important when we think of the fact that now there are about 5 generations represented in the workplace. So you can very well in one office have a 20-year-old working next to a 60-year-old, and they can both have 20/20 vision, but they're going to need vastly different supports in regard to just their vision alone. 8 out of 10 workers experience back pain at some point, and the statistics show that most of these workers are 40 years old or younger, which is very shocking, and it's eye-opening, and it makes us realize that, again, it doesn't necessarily reflect in your physical looks, but you could really have some other things happening and building up over time that are affecting your health in regard to your posture and your behaviors, your repetitive behaviors over time. So this is all, and if anyone's interested in the research behind this, please reach out to me later and I will happily pass along this paper. All right, so how do we decide how this works? Well, this is called our human to environment relations model. And basically what it does is it's like a decision tree, and it basically asks these questions. Does the design meet the user's needs? And if so, there's a homeostasis, and you find that people are moving about the space and they're doing their work and there's no real disruption. But if it doesn't meet the user's needs, there's arousal, there's stress, there's overload, and lots of times this can be expressed, maybe it doesn't manifest necessarily physically right away, but it's in disgruntled workers, or it's presenteeism, or people just don't feel engaged, and there's sort of an overload or stress that's happening. And if this is happening, there's typically an attempt to adapt. And I've seen this before when people, let's say, division will get a new work set up, and you go back 2 weeks later and you find that everything's been kind of moved around, and people will very naturally, there's a reason we've survived more so than any other species, because we adapt and we will do what we have to do to be comfortable to perform. And so people will do things like move chairs across the room or build up books to change their monitor heights or whatever it is they need to do to work well. And if the coping is successful, there is the positive cumulative effects of that. You'll see an increase in productivity. You'll see an increase in engagement and collaboration, innovation. There's a more positive feel and buzz around the office. But if it's unsuccessful, then there will be continued cumulative negative effects. Now, the 3 branches of ergonomics, which I mentioned earlier, are physical, cognitive, and social. And we're first going to go into the physical. And the hallmark of systems thinking is really understanding each element and balancing its demands with the other elements. And so this is where we get into the balancing of the human body, which is the most beautifully constructed mechanism there is. And then there is the built environment. And so how do we bring these two together? And it's important to think, you know, why is it that we care? And it's because it's so important. Ergonomics really does help us understand how we engage and how our body is structured and the mechanisms of that. And so how we can really best use the tool that is the most important to us. And it's important to really keep in mind that health is not the absence of pain or discomfort. It's a positive result of reinforcing activities and actions and behaviors that really are beneficial to humans. And the more that we take care of ourselves, the better equipped we are to take care of an organization that we care about and want to be a productive member of. And so one of the main parts of physical ergonomics is anthropometrics, and it is the chief methodology for determining the fit between the body and the tools and its surroundings. And the science is based on statistical modeling of our bodies. So we're in anthropometrics, it really does completely cover the gamut of the human body throughout the world. And it gathers data from not only just the United States, but from Cesar and different surveys that really take into the account the most petite of people to the tallest and everything in between. And now when we talk about fatigue, when we talk about the body and physical ergonomics, we get into musculoskeletal disorders, and sometimes that's referred to as MSDs. And those are disorders that affect the upper limbs and the neck and the back. There's also eye strain and headaches and muscular pain and fatigue, which we take for granted. I think sometimes, as a nation, we are so used to being tired that we don't really even understand how that is impacting us physically. But fatigue is not just caused by extreme exertion when we think of really working out really hard or being awake, but it's also holding even a neutral posture for too long. And this is why it's not good to just sit, but it's also not good to just stand. Our bodies are built to move. So it's so important to sit, stand, move, repeat. It's so important to change up your visual gaze, to not just stare at a computer screen for hours and hours. You want to move around because fatigue can be caused by even keeping the proper posture for too long. Now, going into MSDs, the cost of musculoskeletal disorders to business in America is significant. It's actually been found that measuring it by compensation costs, lost wages, lost productivity, it costs in the United States alone anywhere between $45 and $54 billion a year. And back pain remains the most common cause of disability among Americans under the age of 45, which every time I say, I still can't wrap my head around how young that is. And that just goes to show that we sit entirely too much. And especially any of you who are in very densely populated cities, the statistics from a couple years ago is that we spend close to 87% of our time indoors as Americans. Well, if you live in a densely populated city where you're either driving or sitting on a subway train, which I know those commutes can be very long, you can add about 6% of that to sitting and being indoors. It's pretty intense. It adds up. So how do we mitigate some of this? Well, there are design considerations. When you think of a work chair, you want to think of a chair that gives you a range of motion and supports you through the movement of your body, something that moves naturally and tilts and is connected in its tilting the way that the body is connected through the pelvis. We want to think of work surface height adjustability so that the desk can follow you when you sit as well as when you stand. You definitely want to think about monitor placement and flexibility. The body will follow the eyes, and if your monitor screen is not adjusted properly, however, wherever your gaze goes, the rest of your body will go, and over time you will find that you're slouching or you're tweaking and doing weird things because everything will accommodate the eyes, everything in your body. You want to think in terms of a keyboard and a mouse adjustability. Make sure that your wrists are neutral and supported. And then again, there's the individual lighting control, which I explained why that's so important earlier. So now, how do we understand cognitive ergonomics? Well, cognitive ergonomics is, I like to think of it in the same way that we think of a computer. Our cognitive ergonomics helps us to understand how we perceive and approach our work and our tools, and it helps us understand how we process information, the effect the environment has on us, and then how we understand our environment in regard to cognitive maps. So going back to the computer analogy, if you think of working on your laptop and you think of any time where you've had a lot of windows open, you'll find that your computer moves more slowly. You know, perhaps it's processing a little longer. Our brains work the same way. I swear to God, the smarter I get, the dumber I get. I have, the more that I study and the more that I want to know and the more that I overload my brain, the harder and harder it is for me to come up with words that go beyond 2 syllables. And I just say that it's not that I'm getting old, it's that I am cognitively overloaded. So for me personally, this slide helps me feel better about myself. But enough about me. We really want to think about the brain and how do we really address a stressor that most of us don't even know is happening, or that if we do recognize it, we want to deny it and put it off on something else. So you want to think in terms of stimulation. What is it in your environment, again, whether it's at a large office or at home, that can help reduce the stimuli that is competing for your brain's attention? So you want to be sure when you're thinking about the optimal workplace for your cognitive abilities, you want to think in terms of natural light, noise, and natural views. Too much light can cause physical pain in the form of glare and discomfort and even impairment. And then on the cognitive side, too much light can interfere with how you process information. And for those of you who maybe work with color or work on in design, be it analog or digitally, you'll understand how light can really affect your perception of color. And then noise also is great in small doses, which is why so many people like coffee shops, because a certain amount of variable buzz really does help you to tune out enough to focus, but too much of it can be very disruptive and stress you out even more. And then natural views are so important because it helps to, if you think in terms of a vacation, you don't always need 2 weeks away. Even just a 5-minute respite for your brain to shift up looking from one place to another and looking outdoors and seeing the movement in trees and seeing light change stimulates the movement of your eyes, so your eye gets some exercise, but it also gives you a nice sense of awareness, which is actually a term, and it can give you, it helps you to decompress and breathe deeply, even if it's just for a few moments. So if you don't have wherever you work some sort of window, just getting outside and walking around the block can be incredibly helpful. So now, how do we understand space, and why is the arrangement of your office workplace important? Well, it's because our brains are not like GPS. We don't remember things like in 200 feet, make a left. We're not wired that way. Everyone, you know, knows if you say, hey, meet me at the Starbucks at the Triangle in Culver City or whatever that, you know, or Washington Square or wherever you are, people will know that automatically. Or you'll remember that you need to make a left at the Taco Bell as opposed to in 200 feet on the street, you know, go 2 miles more after you make the right. So it's very important to think, to remember that we remember according to cognitive maps, and those maps are comprised of 5 different elements. They are paths, which are routes along which people move throughout the landscape. They are edges, which are the boundaries and the breaks in continuity. They are districts, which are areas characterized by identifiable characteristics. Nodes, which are strategic focus points for orientation, like squares or junctions or even crossroads. And then landmarks, and those are easily identifiable physical points of orientation. So even at work, you may say to a colleague, hey, meet me over by the copier in the legal department. That is a cognitive, that's a use of a cognitive map. So when we think in terms of design, we want to accommodate this natural way of moving about the space. So we want to think in terms of lighting and noise. We want to have natural elements. We want to have views to the outdoors, and we want to arrange our spaces in ways that flow naturally for how our brain organizes this space. Some people, you know, I would say in some ways you can think of it in terms of maybe not feng shui because it's taking it a little far, but it's the same idea of how do we arrange a space that feels natural to the mind and the body, and how we naturally socialize, which brings me to the last element of ergonomics, which is social ergonomics. And social ergonomics is really important to help us understand people's behaviors and interaction with each other and how we are impacted by the environment in terms of those engagements. Social ergonomics helps us understand why we make friends, how the built environment can moderate our relationships and even really influence who we become friends with, how it can also set up our social and cultural differences. It can either integrate us or separate us depending on what the objective of the space and the organization is. Now, how we form relationships really breaks into 2 main areas. There are the caregiving and the affiliative. And it's a funny thing, but a recent study shows that it's really this simple. People who feel loved at work perform better. And it was really interesting in the research that they didn't use the word like, they didn't use some technical term for it. Literally, people who feel loved at work do better at work. And it will keep someone employed at an organization longer than pay, or whether or not they even enjoy their job. It's how many friends they have, how appreciated, how loved they feel. So it's really important to give some consideration to attachment systems and our patterns of behavior, and really think about human engagement and interaction on an interpersonal level. There we go. Let's see if that changes. There we go. Now, one aspect of social ergonomics is proxemics, and it's the why of where we are. And any of you who are calling in from overseas, who have spent a lot of time overseas, will really relate to this, that the slide you're looking at now is really based on American standards in terms of how many feet in distance, or distance in feet you hold between yourself and another person based on the relationship. So if you have an intimate relationship, you're close friends, it can be anywhere from you're touching to about 1.5 feet. And then it just increases as you go from personal to social to public. And this can be different in different countries, which is why it's so important to understand that while the 3 branches of ergonomics are true to all humans, the nuances within that are really particular to the culture in which you live, and that culture can be not only just the country or the city you live in, but even the culture within your organization. So these numbers can be flexible depending on where you are. And personal space is such an important thing, and it really helps us understand how to design our organizations based on how our culture performs and what our objectives are, and then maybe what we want to get out of our culture. If you want to build more collaboration, then maybe you put departments closer together. You create spaces wherein they can come and they can physically stand closer to one another or see each other more easily, so that those connections can begin to build. And we found that people who see each other more often are more likely to like each other. So it's as simple as maybe taking down, not having so many private offices, or so that teams can really see one another. And the more literally they just see each other, the more familiar they feel, the more trust they feel, the more at ease they feel, and everything follows that. And then the aspect of territoriality in social ergonomics is a fun one, because I always like to make fun of this. If you've ever had a seating situation where you're close to someone, or you'll see this a lot in airports or on subways, where someone will, particularly women, we may have a big bag that we're carrying, and we'll put it in a chair next to us because our bag really needs that chair. Not really. What that bag is doing is saying, don't get too close to me. This is my space. And it's really, and not only do individuals exhibit it as a way to protect and define what's ours, but groups do as well. So it's different people express it in different ways, and it's very important to allow people to do this. It's a fine balance, right? You don't want to, there are some organizations that can, where people get way too territorial and it impedes work performance. But then there are other situations where, let's say you work in a showroom that you work and show in, and the space becomes too neat. And it's important, and that doesn't work either, because we are, you know, people do want to nest, and we feel more comfortable when we can personalize things. So it's important for people to at least have a locker if they don't have an assigned space. It's important to allow people to personalize their space to some degree. If you are working from home, it's so important to, while you don't want to have your office cluttered with distractions, to make sure that it's comfortable for you and it gives you a sense of belonging and of ownership, so that you feel like, okay, this is my space, this is my domain, I've got this. And then privacy. So we can think of privacy in a couple of ways, and these illustrations are great, where you can move the button up and down. How do you want to regulate your social interaction? And then how much control do you want to have to, or allow for people to access your own personal, you know, goings on? So there's the auditory, the visual, and the social. And many open office places will provide what they call phone booths. So if you get a personal call, you may have a great relationship with your coworkers, but they really don't want to listen to your phone call with the babysitter. Or, you know, you need to have a private discussion with a coworker, and you need to be able to go away. And sometimes the reason that glass enclosed offices aren't always so great, or rooms are not always so great, it's because you also need some sort of visual privacy. So lots of times we'll find that people either provide one or the other in the space, and that's great. You also want to consider, however, having a room where you can have a little bit of both, where you can have the visual and the auditory privacy, so that you can really feel safe and at ease expressing or engaging however you need to based on the conversation at hand. So some design considerations for social ergonomics are to be sure to be able to support groups of different sizes, to allow people to choose the personal space they want, and really encourage spontaneous interaction through how you arrange this space. Let people regulate their privacy, and let people personalize their space. So keep in mind that ergonomics is more than a good chair. It is a holistic endeavor. And always be sure to sit, stand, move, repeat, to mix it up, not just physically, but mentally and visually. And you know what? Be a good neighbor. give your neighbors some space, and also be good to yourself and take a little space for your time, whatever that means. Everyone will thank you for it. And then please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you do and you reference People on the Go, I will send you a physical copy of Herman Miller's Living Office magazine. It is awesome. It is beautifully designed and full of research and insights. And you can click on the images below to learn more about our living office and to learn more about our our approach to ergonomics. And that is it. Thank you so much. I think I went right to time. So
wonderful. Thank you so much, Melissa. That was excellent. And thank you all for staying after just a little bit while we get into our Q&A. By the way, if you have some questions, please go ahead and start to ask them in the questions panel now. You can get in touch with Melissa via the handouts that I sent you that has a link to her LinkedIn, or you can contact her below at her email here. You can access her directly. Just a couple of reminders before we close out today and get into the Q&A. I'd like to invite you to become a member of our Accomplishing More with Less community. You can check out our blog. You can join our Accomplishing More with Less groups on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can also check out our Facebook page for the Perfect 15-Minute Day Method. We're also on LinkedIn, of course. And you can follow Pierre Kawand, our founder, on Twitter. A special announcement here is that we are hosting a really, really awesome workshop taking place in San Francisco at the Presidio, August 15th. It's a full-day workshop, and it's Mindfulness at Work meets Emotional Intelligence at Work. So that's going to get you going in these deep areas, giving you practical knowledge, tips, strategies to really get going in both of these areas. We're partnering with Layla Jakovich, who presented at one of our previous Lunch and Learns, and Pierre will be giving you more insights on the Perfect 15-Minute Day method. We have an individual seat price, and I'm going to send you a link to that now in the questions panel. These are also available in the slides. I'm sorry, in the chat box there. That's coming to you there, a handy link. And then for small groups, we also have some discounts there. So for up to 5 people, our discount is $7.50, and you can, again, access that link directly in the handouts. And then for large groups, up to 15 people, $1,500 for the group there. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at training@people-onthego.com. And then for our nonprofits, we also have a scholarship available, and if you would be so kind as to fill out this SurveyMonkey form that I just sent you in the chat, you can go ahead and apply for the scholarship. And by the way, that is ending tomorrow at the end of day, so please go ahead and take advantage of that while you can. And now for our Q&A. Thank you so much, Kathleen, for the compliment. Great topic and speaker. Definitely agree there. Melissa, I have a question here for you. You had so many great tips. It really gave me so much more information than I knew about ergonomics in the workplace. One thing to consider that I wanted to ask, and you made a lot of compelling reasons, but do you have any tips for really how to make the case in our workplaces for these types of ergonomic improvements? You definitely armed us with a lot of information, but any other tips on really, helping us be able to transform our own workplaces?
Absolutely. Well, if in regard to building a case, that slide that I showed earlier where it gets into the cost of physical ailments and how that adds up to a $17.50 return, that slide alone, I've used that slide, or we all have, so effectively, because that typically, if you think in terms of from a business's point of view, they don't just care, it's not like they just care about the money because they don't care about the people, but they have to care about the money in order to employ the people, right? So when you show them, when you lead with that and you show them how this all adds up, and then you can hand them the research, which there is a lot of research on it, that gets their attention right away to build the case. And then the latter part of your question, I believe, it's around how do you make those adjustments? You know, those are things that even if your organization isn't able to, or at that, or, you know, currently really investing in ergonomic furnishings, there are behaviors that you can adopt and things that you can begin to do for yourself to just, and it's just a matter of being mindful, you know, and self-aware.
Right. Great. Thank you so much. You mentioned the sit, stand, move, repeat mantra, which I'm going to repeat to myself, I know, during the course of my workday. Do you have any suggestions on how, you know, how long we should make those intervals, you know, to kind of do that and move around a bit?
Yeah, the standard is for every hour you sit, you should move about 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, great.
Or stand, I should not move, but stand. I know for some people that can seem pretty daunting, particularly if you have the type of, if your job requires you to get, I call it locked in, where you just get so super focused that 5 hours goes by and you don't even notice. You've probably not even taken a breath. But if you can set, if you don't have sit to stand, or something like Herman Miller has Live OS, which is basically a Fitbit for your table that will tell you when to stand up and move for you, even if it's setting your clock or your smartphone to remind you, like, hey, you maybe if you don't have a sit to stand desk, just, you know, stand up, get a keyboard tray that will stand up with you and a monitor arm that you can adjust up, or walk to the kitchen and get water instead of sitting at your desk. You know, just add those things into your day and remind yourself, because we're human. We do
Right.
get locked in, you know?
So true.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for your presentation, and thank you all for joining us. I look forward to having you at a future event. When you exit today, a feedback form will pop up on your screen, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback. Thank you
Thank
all
you.
again. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.